Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. I am Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
What's up, Pipsqueaks?
Reuben Bressler.
Pip pip cheerio.
Pip pip hooray. We're here, for those who don't know, before we get started here, pip cards are when there are three or more of the same mana symbol on a Magic card. They call those pips. You know, each mana symbol is a pip, and so these are the pips cards.
Yeah. Originally used from like six-sided dice, the dots on dice are called pips. Mm-hmm. The symbols on, for example, there are 9 pips on a 9 of hearts in a deck of cards, and so that's been transferred over to Magic. So hence pip.
When I think of pips, I think of Star Trek, and when on your collar you can tell somebody's rank based on their pips. And so if somebody gets promoted or demoted, the pips that they have will change.
Nice. Well, we also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention. Well, Reuben will tell us who was the most elegant and letting us know what what tribe we did not choose. This is one of our top 10 tribes. Reuben?
We did it again, y'all. We incurred the wrath of the internet.
We shook the hive.
We did. We shook the hive. And Hornets were not the choice. However, we did have a few choices that people brought up. Wizards was popular. People asking where their wizards were. But far and away, the most popular response to us was, where are the slivers?
Where are the
Sliver fans came out.
And yeah, the sliver fans were here, and their meat hooks were tearing into us. And Spencer Ward is going to take the meat hooks trophy this week. I did have a tribe in mind I was excited to pitch for, but you guys pulled a Watsy and accidentally the whole thing. Where are slivers? Did everyone forget the most iconic tribe of MTG? Do you like Lords in Synergy? Slivers tosses in keyword salad absolutely free. They're the most beloved and most feared tribe in MTG amongst the majority of the player base. You can say Eldrazi or Gabos are the king all day, but slivers will always be the queen of MTG.
Jeez.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because when I was at Friendsgiving the other day, my friend Dylan was playing a first Sliver commander deck, and I had never seen that thing in action before. I just assumed the cascade only happened once.
Yeah.
So, like, you cascade, and if you find another Sliver, you cascade again.
Yep,
and I was like, are you serious? And, like, that card just blew me away.
Yeah. There's also a modern deck that uses Morphadron, in case you didn't know. That is basically, you try to get Sorin Imperious Bloodlord, you minus it to put your Changeling Morphadron into play, you choose slivers, and then you put a first sliver into play, and then, like, a Sliver Legion and cascade your brains out.
That's a lot of work, but it could be worth it.
It's a lot of work, but it is hilarious.
It sounds like a lot of fun. Spencer Ward, thank you so much for being a part of the show. Yes, one of us should have absolutely had slivers on their list somewhere, quite frankly. It's fine, but you will be the one who will make out in this instance. Please contact Erin before she blocks you on all social media.
I'm thinking about it
to get your $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. Thanks to CSI, of course, for sponsoring that giveaway. And we're going to do it all again with this episode. Whichever pip card we did not talk about, you guys can let us know in the comments, and maybe you too could be highlighted by Reuben himself.
That's right.
That's right. So we are talking about our top 10 pip cards, which there's a lot of them. This is
60 per color, give or take.
Ish. I think green had the most, but you had.
Now, to clarify, we chose permanents, yeah?
Yes.
No.
Oh.
No, actually, no. Not just permanents.
I was just going off of, like, which ones add devotion.
Most of mine are, for what it's worth, are
most of
are
mine.
permanents.
I think I have 2 that are not.
I have 2 that are
I
not.
think they're pretty. I have 3 that are not, but they're pretty worth it.
Sure, fair.
Fair enough. Either way, this was, if you go to Scryfall and you search for 3 of the mana symbols, and just go, these are the cards that we were looking at. Whether or not they were permanents, I don't think we talked about that beforehand, so that happens. Sure. But that means we get to talk about our top 10 cards with lots of mana symbols on them. My first 2 are higher on someone else's list.
Wow.
So whatever, man.
It's all right. Have those near the bottom. Get started.
Yeah. So speaking of getting started, Reuben, you want to get us going here with number 10?
I do. And I wanted my number 10 to be maybe my favorite cube card of all time, which I don't get to talk about a lot because It doesn't see play in any format. I'm not sure it's in the cube anymore. But it's so much fun. I always would first pick it, and I was never disappointed. It actually technically did win a Pro Tour in the hands of Shota Yasuoka at the Team Pro Tour in 2006 in his Esper control deck. It was the big finisher. My number 10, kicking things off right, is Debtor's Knell.
Oof. Oh, wow.
I love Debtor's Knell. Debtor's Knell is 4 generic mana, and then 3 Orzhov pips. So white, black, white, black, white, black. So you can be paid with either a white or a black mana. This was the first time that you had hybrid mana as it premiered as a rare in Guild Pact. It's an enchantment, 7 mana enchantment, and it says at the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Man, nothing feels better than having a long, grindy game and you just slam a Debtor's Knell and the game's just over from that point on. It is so good. It's like a Planeswalker, right?
Yeah.
It like does a thing every turn. So it's a really great return on investment. It's a great top end to your white-based control decks, your black-based control decks, somewhere in between. I love this card.
Yeah. Usually when you're reanimating things, you're restricted to your own graveyard. Sometimes you'll get symmetrical effects like Exhume, but this is just purely you digging in other graveyards. I mean, it's a little bit of it's an expensive card for the mana cost and even for the actual price, but super worth it if you can get it on the board. And yeah, it's a lot like dealing with a Planeswalker of just, you're going to wear them down.
Like, I feel, well, first of all, Debtor's Knell is amazing. This is a card from Guild Pact. It brings back all the feels, all the memories. This is
and
sweet.
The flavor. The feeling of the Orzhov of like, even if you die, you still don't escape those debts. You still got to pay them, and you'll pay them in your afterlife.
Right, and this was the first time we've seen Ravnica over the Orzhov, so they really had to hammer home what the Orzhov did and why they were unique and special, and this card is terrific. I think in today's world, this would happen at the beginning of your end step instead of at the beginning of your upkeep, because, we have to have instant gratification these days.
Yeah.
I can easily see them doing the exact same card, and it just happens as your end step. Because Debtor's Knell is sweet. I loved it in the cube. Was in the cube from the moment I built mine. It was fantastic. And a great first pick because you're like, well, I'm the weird reanimator deck, so let's go pick fatties and filter cards and stuff.
And compulsive researches and whatever.
Make it happen. All right. Aaron, what's number 10?
Well, you didn't have a number 10, Evan, but you're going to be here in spirit. So my number 10 is an interesting take on a card that we've seen before. So we had Seismic Assault, which was 3 red, and you discarded a land and you could dome something for 2, which was really cool. And then we had I think it was in Origins. There was a version of that I think cost 1, but you had to pay like 1 or 2 per card to do it. And so we've seen many cards like this, where if you discard things, other things happen. Zombie Infestation, one of my personal favorites. If you discard 2 cards, you make a 2/2 zombie, and that's really cool. This is a card that we were recently blessed with in Modern Horizons, and we just hadn't seen anything like it before. And it spoke to me personally, and hopefully to you too, Evan. My number 10 is Iula's Influence. Rah! So Iula's Influence is 3 green. It's an enchantment. You discard a land card, and you create a 2/2 green bear creature token. How cool is that? That like you can just sort of make bears. I think that's so awesome. You can use Evan Irwin bear tokens for your bears, but Iula's just one of those characters that the Vorthos has just fell in love with. This sort of over-the-top queen of the bears with like this rustic-looking crown on her head. Like, you couldn't make this up. And so the fact that we have this really sweet sort of bear queen legendary creature, and now you can make bears, is just so awesome. And I haven't found the right shell to put this in, but if I can make this work in Commander, I absolutely am going to do it.
I mean, anything that lets you discard something for free, for value,
instant speed,
is going to be looked at as something interesting and cool. Iula's Influence is great. You're able to make a whole army out of the cards that you draw, as long as you can discard land cards. Of course, it works with Life from the Loam, which is amazing. And
I didn't even think of that.
And it makes bears. So rare. Which is awesome.
Perfect.
Love it.
I'm honestly afraid at this point that the 2/2 for 2, the bears of the Magic world, like, are going to start to be
obsolete.
Yeah, obsoleted entirely, to where we start getting used to 2 mana 3/3s instead of 2 mana 2/2s.
Right.
Because that's the world we're living in. All right.
Gotta grin and bear it at that point.
Reuben.
I can't bear when you do this.
He's very proud of. I hope you're both very proud of yourselves. I don't even have a number 10 here. Jeez.
I can barely contain my excitement.
God almighty. Reuben, what's your number 9?
My number 9 is the only higher I have on my list.
Ooh, well, you want to bring us home here, Aaron?
I am. I'm just going to say it. I love a big worm. I love a big, obnoxious worm.
This is a family show.
It's a good show. It can't be.
Also, ma'am.
I want power.
No photos,
I want
please.
toughness. I want to render whatever you're doing on the board obsolete. And I can't think of anything better that does this than my number 9, which is Impervious Great Worm. So Impervious Great Worm is 7 colorless and 3 green. That is so much mana. For a creature type worm from Guilds of Ravnica, it was the buy box promo, a 16/16. What?
That's a big boy.
With Convoke. So it's, if you don't want to pay for that the hard way, which Aaron Campbell don't like paying full price for things, you can just Convoke, and so you can save money on that worm. And it has Indestructible too, so no Dies to Doomblade here, no Wrath of God here. This thing is not dying, and so this is just the biggest, the baddest. The art is just so obnoxious and over the top. This worm just sort of no cares given, and I love this card so much.
Goodness gracious. Impervious.
This was the 10 drop from the only 10 drop in Momir online for a minute.
On Arena.
So it just in Arena.
And I remember the graphic being really cool too.
Yeah.
Yeah, the graphic was
graphic.
dope. And this is like the one of the ultimate Timmy cards. Wizards are trying their damnedest to make these buy a box promos good, but they can't be too good. They're exciting, but they can't be too exciting, because if they're the best thing in standard, oh my god. And after Nexus of Fate, it's like, oh god, don't screw it up this time. So they're like, here's a giant Timmy monster worm thing. It's never going to be good in standard. It's super fun casual card, and it's a giant idiot that you get to smash in the red zone with, which is awesome. You need worms for your worm deck.
I need to put an Embercleave on one of these just one time.
God.
Just once. That's it. Just one time. And then we're good.
Getting the vapors on that one. Goodness. All right, let's move on here to number 8. I have one, and I love it, and it's great, and it's so great that they printed it originally at uncommon rarity, and then over time we're like, yo, this is absurd. This card is so good, it has to now be rare. Recently reprinted in Core Set 2019. When it comes to 7 mana, when you tap all the 7 mana, 3 of it being green, and you slam down that Palaka Worm, it's just good feels. It's just the feels. This thing was an uncommon in Rise of the Eldrazi. It's 3 green, 4 generic mana. So it is 7 mana. There's no cost reduction here. You got to pay the full boat. But you get a 7/7 Trampler. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 7 life. And when it dies, you draw a card. It is just value in, value out. It replaces itself. It gets you back in the game. It pulls the things, the sort of the fight back in your favor if you're doing that sort of swingy thing. Palaka Worm is amazing. I love this card. Terrific.
Yeah, this card is the best card, I'm going to say, in common uncommon cube.
Could be. Yeah.
I will always first pick this in that format. It is extremely good. It's a worm that gets you coming and going, Aaron. So
for God's sakes, this is a family show.
Spectacularly good. So if you're going to swing a big worm,
God Almighty, sir, this is a Wendy's.
Please. Place your order and move on. Palaka Worm's spectacular. I really like this card a lot.
Oh my god.
Goodness gracious. All right then. Reuben, what's your number 8?
My number 8 is a card that you might not think of Reuben Bressler, aggro strategist and person who likes going into the red zone, as something I would like, but I have a great appreciation for this card. Partially because of how many times it's completely demolished me in games. Partially because I love it from having played it in the past. Its stats are spectacular. And it was a key part of Gabriel Nassif's Vivid Control deck that he won Pro Tour Kyoto with in 2009. When you're able to play all of the best cards that are available in Standard, you can play your Cruel Ultimatums next to your Volcanic Fallouts, next to your Broodmate Dragons, all of them all together. You have to survive, though. You have to get to the late game. And the best way to survive is after they move into the red zone, you flash in a Plume Veil, and then you just own the red zone for the rest of time.
I love this
Plume
card.
Veil is 3 of the blue-white hybrid mana. So blue-white, blue-white, blue-white. It's a elemental. It's a 4/4 for 3 mana with flash, flying, and defender. just completely ruins combat for any opposing aggro deck. Just is able to stand in front of, Boggart Ram Gangs and Bloodbraid Elves and, Kithkin of all shapes and sizes and survive to tell the tale. Just a spectacular card.
It's blowout material. This is a giant blowout. Basically, every time you land on the board, they're like, oh God, because it's cheap, it's efficient. This is a card that honestly, I think was like too high on the power level for back when it was printed, like for Shadowmoor. This thing was nuts. This thing, like, stats that wasn't anywhere close to anything you could get for 3 mana back then. And like, okay, I guess we get a 4/4 Flash Defender flying, just all the sweet keywords on this awesome uncommon. And it's basically stayed there all the way through Commander 2011 to Modern Masters and Ultimate Masters. And the artwork is also fantastic on it.
Yes.
Absolutely terrific. Aaron, what's number 8?
So when you learn how to play Magic, you are basically taught that you can be anything you want to be. You can be a planeswalker, you can be a necromancer, you can be a dryad sage or a druid, you can be a goblin chieftain and command, little red hordes, you can command, white weenies, you can do worm. You can be anything you want to be in this game. But my number 8 takes it to a whole nother level because you can be a dragon. How cool is that? My number 8 is Form of the Dragon.
Nice.
So Form of the Dragon is 4 colorless and 3 red. It's an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, Form of the Dragon deals 5 damage to target creature or player. At the end of each turn, your life total becomes 5, and then creatures without flying can't attack you. This is you. This is affecting you. Like, you get to be this, We've seen all sorts of effects that, like, affect your board, they affect your creatures, but you, like, how? It's so over the top, and it's so red. And dragons are obviously, very beloved to a lot of people, but just how there's just nothing else like this that just takes you and turns you into this thing, and the flavor of it where, if they're not flying, they can't attack you because you're flying, and that you get to just sort of like just bolt people with your breath or whatever. The flavor of this and just how massive of an effect this is, I just knew I needed this on my list.
I could see this, like, nowadays being reprinted as a enchantment aura curse.
Wasn't there a recent version?
I think there was something similar-esque.
Yeah.
Well, there was another form of something or other, I think, wasn't there? Like an unset or something. But either way, the idea that you essentially enchant the player, and the player is yourself, and be able to turn into a dragon, those little tiny things down there that don't fly, can't get at you, you're always going to be at 5 toughness, essentially. So you get that 5 life at the end of your turn. There's that awesome version, like there's the kind of weird looking version from Scourge with that funky looking head and the neck and thing.
I love that one.
But like, you got the awesome Sarkin, like with the flames out of his mouth and eyes, like that's sick. So it's just only like $5.50. It's still fairly affordable.
You were thinking of Form of the Dinosaur.
There we go.
From Ixalan block, where you went to 15 and then started fighting things. Not as good as Form of the Dragon. Form of the Dragon, very close to being a Pro Tour champion, got 2nd place in Enduring Ideal. This was one of the first things you would search out with your Enduring Ideal, along with Solitary Confinement.
Yeah.
To be able to survive.
Because then only flyers can attack you, and then you can't get damaged. They got the confinement out, so that was awesome.
That's right.
All right, so that's Form of the Dargon, which is great. Move on here to number 7. Reuben, what is your number 7?
There are some creatures in particular, legendary creatures in particular, that when you read them, you think, oh, that's that character. Like, I get it. This character controls this aspect of things. And for my money, no set and no block leaned into what a character was supposed to do more than Time Spiral block did. Ixodor Reality Sculptor set the bar for what a blue wizard would, that is the master of its own domain, would do. But then Teferi Mage of Zalfir came out. And Zalfir came out. And Teferi redefined what it meant to be a blue mage, redefined what it meant to be a wizard and dominate everything in its path. And Teferi dominates the stack and dominates time like no one else. Teferi Mage of Zalfir was 2 colorless, blue, blue, blue. Legendary creature, human wizard with flash. In addition, Creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield have flash, and each opponent can cast spells only at a time that they could cast a sorcery, all on a 3/4 body. So you could flash this in at the end of the turn. You could, for example, do what Guillaume Wafotapa did and search your library for it with mystical teachings, and then once Teferi was in play, you could flash back that mystical teachings and go get any creature in your deck, because they all had flash when they aren't on the battlefield, which was quite the trick that you could pull. I had this in a variety of main decks and sideboards over time. One of my favorite times I had this in a deck was I was playing Storm, and I had a copy of Teferi in my sideboard, and someone tried to tap me down, and I went like ritual Teferi, and they just had no answer to it. And that was one of my favorite memories of Teferi. Just an amazing card.
I remember the first time I ever faced this, I was playing Modern Ad Nauseam, and there was a Jeskai player who played this, and I just didn't get it. And I was and then like when I tried doing things, it was like, oh. And I understood the power of that card. And sometimes Ad Nauseam would even use it as a sideboard card. It's just sort of like protection, so that you could do your thing. But the card was just a beating. And it's neat to sort of look at how far Teferi has come to where, there's just never really been like a bad Teferi, like.
No, there hasn't. And when this first came out, first of all, the time period from Alpha to Time Spiral and the time period from Time Spiral to now, Time Spiral is closer to Alpha than Time Spiral is to now. Just so you guys.
Oh my god.
Just so you know. We can all feel super old right now because holy cow. And when this card came out, as I remember it, no one really liked it. No one thought this was like some monster powerhouse because it's just 3 blue plus more mana beyond that. That's ridiculous. That's a lot of mana. Yeah. And it didn't read like, wow, I got to put in all this mana just for like this whatever. And then you saw basically what happened, which was, wait a minute, I can't kill that at the end of my turn because now I can't play Doomblade anymore. And then you're gonna teachings for what now? You're going to teachings for what was the one that countered the spells, the giant 6-drop guy?
Draining Welk.
Draining Welk. Thank you.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah, you could go find Draining Welks with your mystical teachings after Teferi was on the field, so that was really stupid. Teferi has been amazing. Aren't you glad they made a 3-mana Planeswalker version of this awesome effect that was on a 5-mana card that used to cost 3 blue? Okay. 2019, y'all. Aaron, what's your number 7?
I love my number 7, and I love telling a story about this card. So a couple years ago, I went to GP Minneapolis and hung out with Vorthos Mike and various associates. If you ever get the chance to hang out with Mike, do it. He's a treasure. But we were playing Commander. We were getting ready to play Commander at a diner that wasn't far from the venue. And we were getting ready to like choose our decks, and I presented my deck, and Mike goes, so like, what would you say is the power level of this thing? And I was like, it's like a 4. And then I cast my number 7, and he looks at me and he goes, that's not a 4, because my number 7 is Soul Scour.
Filthy.
So Soul Scour is 7 colorless and 3 white. It is a sorcery from Darksteel, and it simply says destroy all non-artifact permanents, which sounds like it would be a bit of a bummer, but if you're playing a Sharoom deck... Right. And everything was gone. Even my land, because you're playing with like the artifact lands.
Right.
Everything. Lands. This is all permanents. This is lands. This is enchantments. This is planeswalkers. And I just get so happy. I probably have cast this card maybe like 2-3 times in my life, but every time I do, it feels amazing to just everything, especially when you can game the board and everyone else
10. I think that's fine to say that the power level of my deck is a 4 because I have a 10 mana Wrath. That's cool. I think that's totally fine.
I mean, that's a 10 mana obliterate your opponents.
Right.
Right, because if you're playing it in the right deck, you don't care. Yep.
That's like, it's all gone, y'all. It's all gone. And they're like,
it feels so good.
They're like, my planes, my islands? And you're like, yeah, those are.
Right. Those are.
It says right here, non-art. I can't help you.
Oh
Sorry,
God.
it's what we're doing here.
So good.
This card is sweet. And this is a perfect example of a great commander card. It is worth 33 cents. And yet, you will have more insane plays and stories out of this ridiculous rare and how it completely destroyed everybody. Absolutely awesome.
So happy.
Speaking of absolutely destroying everyone not close, here was another creature that for a half minute, people were like, man, that's a lot of mana. You're not going to pay all that mana. I mean, that effect looks super cool, but like, you know, that's ridiculous. It's not going to be a $33-something card to this day. It could only be reprinted one time because it's so freaking expensive and huge and monstrous. It could only be used in some of the most busted decks of all time to bring in this gigantic fatty who makes all your guys absolutely ridiculous. And you're like, I guess I'll find my 8-drop because that's Crater Hoof Behemoth.
Yes.
I'm going to hoof it. Hoof, there it is, y'all. 3 green, 5 generic mana. For a 5/5 mythic creature beast with haste. And when it enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain trample and +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. The elf deck says hello. This card is insane.
This was my number 9.
Nice.
Yeah, so you typically play this with natural order if you're playing in Legacy Elves because you can sacrifice your Dryad Arbor and turn it into a Crater of Behemoth, which is perfectly fair and reasonable. For a week, Dredge was playing this in Vintage because it was a green card we could pitch to Force of Vigor.
Nice.
Which I never thought I would see the day of a Crater Hoof standing next to a row of zombies, but anything is possible. This card is so over the top. I love the flavor text. One of the shining points of, I think it was Avacyn Restored.
Yeah.
And just a brilliant card. And just when you look at this effect, it looks like something you've seen before. Like you'd look at it and go, this can't be that novel. Like something else has done this, right? But even when you look at cards since then, you know, you had the sort of the Decimator of Provinces. Like that was close, but even then that only got you a little bit of a boost. And then there was the, recently there were the pigs from guilds. There was a green, the Domri Forerunners, I think it is. Yeah, and so like when you look, it looks like an effect that you've seen before, but you really haven't, and there hasn't been anything that powerful since then, because look at it.
It scales to just an absurd, like, you know, make the tokens, make the sapperlings, get whatever you can on the board, because this thing is just, it just whoosh, you just run over your opponent with this thing. It is insane. All right, let's move on here to number 6. Reuben, what's number 6?
I share a number 6.
Of all the Pip cards in the whole Pip world, we Pip chose the same Pip thing.
Oh boy.
Me and Reuben. So this is a hell of a card. It didn't quite make my top 5, and I'll note why here once I get to my number 5. Well, whenever we get to it, it's higher on someone else's list. But the point is, for number 6, I think the right card, the man, the goblin that was needed. It wasn't the goblin that we wanted. It was the goblin that we needed. And let me tell you, Goblin Chain Whirler showed up.
Yep.
And I sure am very happy for, what was it, 3 people? No less than 3 people on the set review.
Man, I was so close to getting a pie bet out of Goblin Chain Whirler.
You did. You're that close.
But unfortunately, it was a different triple pipped red card, Jaya Ballard, that we made the deal about. But yeah, this was a Pro Tour winning card, of course, in the hands of Wyatt Darby, because Red Deck wins. Red Deck won a whole bunch back in those days. And Goblin Chain Whirler was a big reason why. It was able to come down, have an effect on the board immediately, and keep control of the board, all for the low cost of red, because it is a 3-mana, 3/3 Goblin Warrior with First Strike. So just a 3/3 for 3 with First Strike. And when it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control.
This was what happens when you bring Llanowar Elves back into Standard. And they go, well, we make this other card in the same set that says, you really want to play that Llanowar Elf? Is that what you want to do? Because Chain Whirler is just going to show up and wreck the entire board. This wrecked token strategies. This wrecked Llanowar Elves from completely running the format. And instead, it ran the format. You got to deal with Chain Whirler all the time and how to stop this 3/3 from destroying you constantly.
It was, of course, part of a cycle of triple pipped 3. Most of them were 3 power, I think. But triple pipped creatures, rares from Dominaria. We might talk about some in the future, but I believe most of them won Pro Tours. Because Tempest Djinn won a Pro Tour or a Mythic Championship, and Benelish Captain also won something. And so they had a huge impact on Standard, even though that prohibitive mana cost may have held them off.
When I think of this card, I immediately think of Soulscar Mage, because if you were able to pair the two, that was brutal. And that was the combination that really helped you deal with the Hazarets and sort of the mono red mirror, because you couldn't deal with her through raw damage. You had to put counters on her. And one of the ways that you could do that and just put counters on everything was to use that. And just a gross, if you're going to do it, make it broken, and Aaron Campbell will play it. And that's sort of how you get me interested in that card. It just,
yeah,
Man.
Card is absolutely
Goblin
ridiculous.
Chain Whirler, Whirling Chains, turning on Spectacle, finishing off X1s, finishing off the last loyalty of Planeswalkers that have ticked down to 1, like 3 mana Teferi. It slices, it dices. It does everything I ever wanted a red card to do. I was so happy that I got to live in a world where I was playing Goblin Chain Whirler all the time, and now I cherish those memories.
It was hard to block. Like, the card was just absurd with how
they were
good
calling
it
for
was.
it to be banned at one point. I mean, I remember that was the card that everyone had their focus on, which was hilarious. When you think about it in hindsight, you're like, that's what you wanted to ban? Like, it just seems ridiculous. But it had such a stranglehold on the format. There was the Goblin Chain Whirler test of does your deck fold to this? If it does, don't bother registering it.
Yeah, don't even bother. It's ridiculous. Aaron, what's your number 6?
So my number 6 is another board wipe. And, number 7 was cute. Obviously I got some broken giggles out of it. But if you really want to do a board wipe, and you really want to get rid of everything, and you really want to prove your point, no other board wipe does it better than this one. My number 6 is Apocalypse. So Apocalypse is 2 colorless and 3 red. It's a sorcery. Remove all permanents from the game. Even you, artifact player, there's no getting around this. I don't care if you have indestructible. I don't care if you have protection from whatever. It is gone. And then on top of that, discard your hand. Like, this is devastating. And I love the art here. I love the flavor text from Oracle Envec. Shout out to the old school Magic players who'll know who she is. There's a future in which I can see only mist and a single shadow. I mean,
This
you
is
just-
also...
you feel it. Like, just looking at this card, you're like, whoo, like, it's just so final.
Well, yeah, this is from Tempest, so this is like old school. This is cool. This is sweet. The art's really evocative and not traditional fantasy stuff that we've been inundated with for over a decade now. And it's also a part of the reserve list. This card, they're not going to make it any more of it, which is kind of insane. It's also only it's less than $5, so this is still a good buy at this point. And the effect it has is real. You just exile everything and discard your hand. Now, if you can do things like Bottle Cloister or some other way of trying to get cards back in your hand,
Sure.
that's something you can try to do. But
there are ways to hide your permanents, things like Petrodon, for example, comes to mind as a way to make a land hide somewhere so that you can keep it for later. That was the old Whirlfire Thragtusk trick, for example. You can do that with Apocalypse, but it takes some setup.
yeah, and this is a card that it just reads so powerful. 5 mana.
It reads a lot better than it actually is,
Yep.
but it still it reads amazing.
Right. The key to any of these types of board wipes is what do you do after? And Apocalypse is I'm going to kind of guarantee you don't do much after, and that's kind of the issue. So
Yeah.
okay. All right, let's move on here to number 5. Mine is higher on someone else's list. This is my last higher. Reuben, what's your number 5?
So I had to choose a card for my top 5 that I feel is the card that builds devotion.
Oh.
If we're talking about pips, we're talking about devotion. We're talking about the Theros gods. We're talking about the cards that I feel were the best at fueling devotion. And there's one card that, based on its casting cost, was the reason why Devotion to Blue and Devotion to Black were able to get to their requisite devotion amounts. And that card is Nightveil Specter. Nightveil Specter is 3 of the blue-black hybrid manas for a 2/3 flyer, creature type Specter. When Nightveil Specter deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top card of their library. You may play cards exiled with Nightveil Specter. Originally a rare from Gatecrash, Nightveil Specter spent its whole life in the spotlight. It was obviously started out in most of those Devotion to Blue decks that took over Pro Tour Theros and the early part of the Grand Prix season. thereafter in 2013. And then once Black Devotion took over, it was still a staple part of that deck because it was able to turn on Erebos and be a card draw engine and a threat in and of itself. So being able to do both things equally well and survive shock and that kind of effect, stand in front of 2/2s if you really needed to. It was just such an incredibly good card, even though Gatecrash itself wasn't the greatest set of all time. This one certainly took the cake.
This
No.
card felt like a sleeper.
Yeah, I'll challenge you on that one. No one gave a damn about this card until Theros showed up. When Theros showed up and Devotion showed up,
sure.
Then we care about pips. Then this card becomes one of the best cards in Gatecrash. It went from absolutely never played ever to part of the
Devotion.
core. Yeah, until the core part of a lot of very powerful decks. This card was very scary. Nobody wanted to get hit with this thing. Was it, it's not Thief of Hope. What's the one, the blue-black one these days? Thief of Sanity.
Thief of Sanity.
Thank you. Thief of Sanity. This was sort of like the OG Thief of Sanity, and it's a lot easier to cast these days, essentially, but Nightvale Specter is still real and did fuel all of those decks. This was your 3-drop you wanted in both of those decks, really.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Nightvale Specter is a sweet one. Aaron, what is your number 5?
My number 5 is a popular Reanimator target. So if you're playing a Reanimator deck, you would like to play something that just kind of ends the game. You want to play an Elishnorn. You want to play a Griselbrand. You want something that you can just sort of drop that and hopefully they just don't make you play it out, or it's enough to get the job done. But sometimes you're playing against a deck, specifically like Eldrazi, where a Griselbrand might not be enough, an Elishnorn might not be enough. And so you need something that really just sort of buys you some time to close out the game. We've also talked a lot about how Wizards has been pushing these cards that are asymmetrical effects. We've seen cards like Lavinia, we've seen cards like, the Karn and the Narsets that have this really punishing effect on the opponent, but don't really punish you. And my number 5 is a really great example of this. My number 5 is Blazing Archon. So Blazing Archon is 6 colorless and 3 white. It's a creature type Archon, which was originally in Ravnica, I believe. Flying, and then it says creatures can't attack you. 5 power, 6 toughness. You can still attack. So if you're playing against any sort of aggressive deck, you reanimate this. This is also an Oath of Druids target in Vintage. You oath into this, and you're good. Dredge has no way to deal with this. And meanwhile, you just have a big creature with an evasion ability, and you can win the game with this. I also have it in my Marchesa EDH deck, which is very political, being the queen. You can't attack the queen, but this thing can fly over the castle and kill people. This is really, really hard to deal with. That art is beautiful. You have the collaboration between Zoltan Boros and Gabor Zixi, of just this sort of beautiful golden creature, this being just flying in there on this red sky. Everything about this card is so majestic, and there's just nothing else like it.
It's very epic. Like, it's an epic card. It's like very high numbers.
Attack you.
Yeah, I love very powerful short sentences. Those are the type of things that just like, this is it. You're not going to do this. You're not going to draw more than 1 card a turn. Period. You're not going to play things except you can't play instants and sorceries during your turn. Period. Like these are things that are happening. And for 4 magical words to do so much to a game, you're like, oh, this game is now all about Blazing Archon now. I get it. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
And it was in Cube, did the exact same thing. Cube, you reanimated this thing. It's like, well, you got a removal spell because I got you 4-turn clock right here flying.
Yeah.
So you couldn't block it easily either. So card was super duper dope. All right. Let's move on here to number 4. Reuben, what's number 4?
It's funny because I heard Aaron describing Blazing Archon, and I could have sworn she was describing my number 4. Big, giant, white creature, fatty. That's also often a reanimator target. That's asymmetrical. It's a huge cost, but it just shuts a game down, and the whole game becomes about that card. This one is so powerful that it's even banned in Commander. My number 4 is Iona, Shield of Emeria.
Yes.
Yeah.
Iona, Shield of Emeria, has a high price tag. 6 colorless, white for legendary creature Angel. She's a 7/7 with flying, and as Iona, Shield of Emeria enters the battlefield, choose a color. Your opponents can't cast spells of the chosen color. Iconic to the point of being reprinted in From the Vault Angels after first seeing print in Zendikar. Came close to Pro Tour victory in Dredge. in the hands of Naoki Shimizu at Pro Tour Austin in 2009. That was Brian Kibler's Zoo win. And this was one of the big targets that you wanted to hit off of your Dread returns.
Yeah.
Iona's just one of the end-all, be-all, top-end fatties of all time.
So I've talked about Iona on various lists. I was trying to pick cards I haven't talked about before, but I mean, Iona's just one of those cards. There's nothing sweeter than you don't want Iona against a lot of decks. You know, I talked about Eldrazi. Eldrazi is better for Blazing Archon because they don't have a color to them. Or if you're playing a multicolored deck, you know, like some of these Grixis Delver decks or the Temur Delver decks or whatever, she doesn't really do much. But if you're playing against Miracles and name white, there goes your Terminus, there goes your Swords. If you're playing against Storm and you name black, what are you going to do? You know, when you Elves, a turn 1 against Elves is just nasty. Right. Or Burn, you know, like part of Reanimator is people don't think of it like this, but Reanimator is essentially a toolbox deck, and you need to find the right tool for the job. And so if Iona's the right tool, man, she does a good job. And again, just here's a 7/7 body. Like, there have been times I've reanimated her knowing she wasn't the best choice, but it's still a 7/7 body with flying. Like, it'll do.
Sometimes it's just a giant monster, and that's what you need it to be.
Exactly.
For me, every time I've played this card, it always felt like I was cursed. I always chose the wrong color in cube. I'd be playing the blue-black deck, and I'd be sitting there and be like, okay, I got them. They got
Shade of Vapor?
They got Cryptic Command, right? Okay, blue. And then they go Doomblade. I go,
Right.
You know?
I name white against Miracles, and they play a Jace. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's the lot in life.
Yeah, I always felt like Iona and me never really got on the same groove because I always picked the wrong color. But it's all good.
How Iona got her group back. I would read that book.
Oh, so much. I thought he was going with ironic Iona.
I know. It's Ionic, don't you think?
Isn't it Iona?
Oh my God.
See like 4 Ionas in the car, different versions. Love it.
It's like
one shows red, one shows green. Oh my God, this is happening. Okay.
We're doing this. All right. Aaron, what's number 4?
My number 4 is another popular target in Oath of Druids, which I did not see coming. Last week, I picked up Storm in Vintage, which was a lot of fun. And somebody told me that if this card sticks against me, I cannot win the game. And I didn't get it. I was just like, what do you mean? I'm freaking Storm. Of course they can win the game. And then I realized, I read the card and I was like, oh no. This is a popular character in Magic that has alternated from being really, really good to really, really bad at various points, is seeing a bit of a resurgence in Standard, courtesy of the Fires of Invention decks. But this version has also seen play, and also sees play in Oath of Druids decks. My number 4 is Niv Mizzet Perun. So Niv Mizzet Perun is 3 blue and 3 red, no colorless, legendary creature Dragon Wizard, 5/5. This spell can't be countered. Okay. With flying, whenever you draw a card, Niv Mizzet Perun deals 1 damage to any target. So if you pair this with a Grizzlebrand, and you draw 7, you just beam someone to death. That's one of the ways that Oath of Druids wins games in Vintage. That's second amazing part, which affected me personally playing Storm, is whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, you draw a card. So think about that. Yeah. So if you're trying to storm off, so you go Dark Ritual, triggers, draw a card, and then they draw a card and I take one. That's not good, especially if you've been using Necropotence, especially if you've been using Ballista Citadel. And my friend was very much right. If you are playing Storm and you face a Niv Mizzet, just pack it up and go home, girl. It's not going to end well for you. But, I mean, this card is just really, really good. The art by Svetlin Velinov. This card is just so It has so many neat things you can do. And it's good enough to see play in 2 or 3 formats. I mean, how can you go wrong?
This was my number 10.
Yeah.
Niv Mizzet Perun, because it's also nice that it hits like 2 different pip, colors, essentially.
This is the pippiest pips.
It's super duper pippy. And because this card was one of the first cards I got to play from Guilds of Ravnica where I'm like, if I untap with this card, we're done here. Like, it's actually factually finished.
Which is how it should be.
Yeah. I cannot remember a time which I untapped with the Mizzet Perun and I lost. Like, it's just difficult because you're drawing cards. Anything they do basically lets you draw a card. If they answer to Mizzet, you're drawing cards. Like, you're shooting down every little monster that they have. You have this giant 5/5 flyer that's good enough to end the game by himself, along with Expansion Explosion, which if you're drawing cards, you're starting to deal more damage. Like, it is absolutely ridiculous how good Niv Mizzet Perun is, not only with the other spells and Izzet, but just as a card that, oh my God, you resolve what? And it does what? And I'm dead now. That's how Niv Mizzet works.
Yep. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Card's absurd. I love playing with Niv Mizzet. It just feels good.
It just feels terrific. Well, another card that feels terrific and is one of, I would describe this as like, if they're like, okay, well, what would you describe as one of the top 5 all-time Commander cards? And I think that, I didn't make the format. I don't get to play it a whole bunch. I just know a lot of people who do. I know the fact that if they ever get near this card, it is always worth $15+. They have reprinted this thing 7 times and it's $15. There ain't no cheap Grave Pact, y'all. There is one Grave Pact to rule them all. And that card is absurd every single time they print it. It's amazing. Grave Pact is black, and 1 generic mana for a rare enchantment from Stronghold.
Yep.
Most recently printed in the Commander Anthology Volume 2, also in Commander 2011 before that. It is 3 black and a generic mana for a rare enchantment that says whenever any creature you control is put into a graveyard, or these days, whenever a creature you control dies, each other player sacrifices a creature. Simple, beautiful, unique, elegant, and my God, will just take over a game.
This card can immediately make a game a downer in EDH, and now you compare it with Dictative Erebos and effectively have 2 of them. I mean it's good for devotion, but especially if you're playing a deck that can steer the game in such a way to where you benefit. I'm looking back on it now on all the times that I've managed to stick one, and it's a huge downer. It just feels bad, Most Commander decks do rely on creatures, even if you're not a Voltron deck. It's bad enough if you're relying on one. It's even worse when you have an army, and it's good when you're going wide. It's good when they're going, with one big creature. There's just no world in which it's not good. And it's also so powerful that you don't even have to try. You can do aristocrat type things, or you can just play a normal game of Magic and just have yourself this insurance policy as you're just doing your thing. It's so good.
It sounds like those are the same arguments people were when Tarmogoyf first came out. They're like, well, you gotta cycle stuff and sacrifice stuff. It's like, no, you just play Magic, and it's a great card.
Yeah,
absolutely fantastic. Let's move on here to our number 3. Reuben, what's number 3?
My number 3 has won a great number of tournaments as a pairing of a 1-2 punch. It is one of the most iconic goblins of all time. It does have a Pro Tour win. I think it might have 2, actually, both in Splinter Twin strategies. It's also still in the cube. And it's also from Champions of Kamigawa, because my entry is Kikijiki, Mirror Breaker.
Hey,
it's my number 5.
2 colorless red. There you go. 2 colorless red gets you a legendary creature, Goblin Shaman, 2/2 with haste, that has tap, create a token that's a copy of target non-legendary creature you control, except it has haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Of course, this was the first Pro Tour champion was Samuel Estradi, who won Pro Tour Philadelphia in 2011. This was also a piece of the Flash Hulk combo that took down Grand Prix Columbus the first. And has won a number of tournaments in between, been in Birthing Pod decks, in addition to the twin Exarch kind of strategies, and has also just been a value engine in cubes over the years, being able to copy various comes into play and leaves play effects on the battlefield.
Card is absolutely ridiculous and awesome and sweet. And this was my number 6, or this is my number 5 rather, because Chain Whirler is great, but Kiki-Jiki, if you're going to pick a triple red spell to put on top, this is the triple red spell. This card has affected formats, destroyed multiple tournaments, has put dread in many a player of, wait, you're doing what with your Court of Calling? You're getting who's a what's it now? And also it's been one of those key cards that it's like, let me show you how this works, okay? It's like, this is it, and then you die. And that's kind of how Kiki-Jiki goes.
It really only got better as creatures got better. In the last few years, you look at just some of the creatures that have come out now and the emphasis on ETB effects and, a card that is powerful on its... Who would have thought that Restoration Angel? I remember the first time somebody walked me through that combo and I was like, can you... What? And then they were like, so Kiki, Resto, Bounce. And I was just like, get out of here. And it kind of had the Birthing Pod problem of the more creatures got better, the more of a state, the more the more stock this card had. And I remember Jeff Hoogland doing hideous things with this card. It's just ridiculous.
Right, because this card didn't start out expensive. It
No.
wasn't even exciting. No one gave a crap about Kiki Jiki until years later, when all of these awesome creatures that could create infinite combos suddenly was like, wait a minute, this creature works perfectly with that creature, and you got my peanut butter and your chocolate, and your chocolate and my peanut butter. And Kiki Jiki killed everybody. Aaron, what's number 3?
My number 3 is a card that I have never paid full price for. You will never, ever catch me paying full price for this card. And it's better if you don't. It's another one of those cards that doesn't end the game. It doesn't appear to end the game, but if this ever hits the table, you might as well just pack them up effectively. I have had fun playing with this card in Vintage, in Legacy, most recently in Standard, in the deck that our friend Murmur from our Discord called, and me and Murmur worked on, called Flood My Basement. My number 3 is Omniscience. So Omniscience is 7 colorless and 3 blue, which nobody has ever paid for. It is an enchantment, and it simply says you may cast spells from your hand without paying their mana cost. So in Standard, you would play this with Flood of Tears, so you would get to a point where you bounce everything, and then whoop! So good! If you're playing Legacy, this is a key piece of these Sneak and Show decks, or the Show and Tell decks. You play Show and Tell, and you're just like, whoop! And then because Legacy is a format of cantrips, you just draw your way into something stupid like Emrakul and you win the game. You can play this in Vintage with a card called Academy Rector, which is 3 colorless, a white, and you sacrifice it, and then whoop!
It goes and gets an enchantment and just puts it on the battlefield, no matter what it is or what it costs. It's stupid.
So good.
It's ridiculous.
Like it feels amazing, and it's just one of those cards that when you look at it, people always think they have a chance. They're like, oh, maybe you'll brick. They never brick. Like if you build your deck right, they will find something, and you just will not be playing anymore. And so I love how over the top it is. I love the flavor text of Jace, and I just think of all the dumb things I have ever done with this card, and it just feels so good.
I mean, thank God they reprinted it. It was from Magic 2013. They finally brought it back as an Amonkhet Invocation, which doesn't really count, but they actually factually reprinted it in Core Set 2019. So it's like $7 now instead of 2025 or whatever it used to be. Because it just this is as close, I think, that you can get to a Magic card that just says nothing really matters. Like whatever you want to do is fine. It's fine.
One of my favorite things I've ever seen the way that decks develop is very funny. The way that archetypes evolve into their best selves over time is very funny. And there was a short period of time where the best thing that you could be doing was playing Show and Tell, extremely powerful card. Yeah. Putting an Omniscience into play, extremely powerful card. Casting Enter the Infinite,
yes,
which is another extremely powerful card. Putting an Emrakul on top of your deck as the last card back on top of your deck, extremely powerful. Then getting Cunning Wish, one of the wish cycles, and getting, checks notes, Release the Ants, an uncommon from Morningtide. And that was...
I've lost to that card before. It is embarrassing.
And get bit to death by ants.
Is it though? Is it?
That's
Release the Ants is great. Release the Ants
is a pretty embarrassing card to lose to,
yeah.
but it was exactly what the deck needed.
For those who don't know, Release the Ants is a red and a generic mana for an uncommon instant from Morningtide that says Release the Ants deals 1 damage to target creature or player, clash with an opponent. If you win, return Release the Ants to its owner's hand. Each clashing player reveals the top card of their library. See, you need the Emrakul on top.
You need the Emrakul.
And then puts that card on the top or bottom.
So
a player wins.
You're always going to win.
A player wins if his or her card had a higher converted mana cost.
You're always going to win unless your opponent has an Emrakul on top.
Which you always will win.
Feels bad, man.
That's ridiculous. Omniscience was also my number 9, by the way. This, for me, definitely belongs on the top 10. Oh my God, that card does what list? Speaking of oh my card, that card. Oh my God, that card does what? Oh my card, that God does what? Maybe we'll get that in Theros. Am I right? Okay. So, oh my card. Like this next one was one of those where it's a spell, yes, and my next one's a spell too, but like these are format defining cards. These are cards that you can't bring up. You can just say the mechanic, you can just say one word of it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. These are classic cards that are just stupidly overpowered. Because the entire Miracles deck exists, because Entreat the Angels is a magic card. Entreat the Angels is 3 white XX for a mythic sorcery that says create X 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying, but it has Miracle of X white. You may cast this card for its miracle cost when you draw it if it's the first card you drew this turn. That is stupid and overpowered and crazy and brought many a pro to their knees because they were so pissed at Miracles. Miracles is the Timmy mechanic. Miracles is the broadcast, show this on a big television when they flip over the bonfire,
It's
they
so
flip over the
exciting.
entreat. It's so exciting. Like, it is made for awesome viewership, and oh my god, do the pros absolutely hate it, because that type of variance is just like mind-boggling.
The problem with Miracles is that it got to a point where it wasn't a miracle anymore. You know, the point of a miracle is that you weren't supposed to have any control of when it was going to happen. Like particularly in the bonfire decks, if I remember correctly, there wasn't a way to really stack your deck so that when you did reveal the bonfire, it felt miraculous. The problem is when you start playing these blue decks, you have Brainstorm and Preordain and Ponder and Predict even. You have Sensei's Divining Top to where it's not so much of a miracle anymore, and to where you can play this sort of grindy blue-white, bore you to tears style control deck, and then when the coast is clear, you literally stack your deck in such a way to where it's Entreat time, and you now have a way to turn the corner and close out games. And you don't even have to go hog wild with it. You can Entreat for 2 or even 3 and still just close a game out. And so that's really when it became a problem, is when it was something you could control.
They're just giant monsters for very little mana. I mean, and you get formats where you can just go manipulate the top of your library like crazy. And I agree. It stops losing that's the flavor. The flavor is that exciting moment. It's not that exciting when you see it coming.
Right.
Like, okay, this miracle's coming. Hold on. We'll be here in just like 2 minutes. Jeez. All right. Let's move over here to number 2. Reuben, what is your number 2?
I chose a different blue enchantment for my number 2. And it's an enchantment that dominated a format for a short period of time, way long time ago in the before times, back when the rocks were soft and this was all trees. But it did dominate a format for a good long time. And it was so dominant and so scary that it was banned in every playable format for a period of its time. It was unbanned in most of them. Technically, I think it's still banned in Standard. I'm not entirely sure. But it's originally from Exodus, so it doesn't matter. It's only ever been printed the one time. It's the only entry on my list with 4 colored pips instead of just 3. My number 2 is Mind Over Matter.
Ooh.
Yep, that card's dumb.
Mind Over Matter is 2 colorless blue for an enchantment, a rare from Exodus. Discard a card, you may tap or untap target artifact, creature, or land. This was the central engine for Tommy Hovey's Academy.deck. It was also a featured part of High Tide, of CMU. There was a bunch of decks that used Mind Over Matter in concert with things like Mana Vault. And you could do Mox Diamond as well to be able to Stroke of Genius for a gazillion, or Time Spiral or Windfall to get all those cards into your deck, and then finally be able to stroke your opponent until they lost the game. This was a huge piece of that strategy, and it dominated formats in 1998 for a little while, and that's been about it.
It's ridiculous. Well, it's on the reserve list, so we're never going to see this thing come back. This card is ridiculous. This card is insane. This is like a wonderful poster child for what in the hell were you thinking of the cost versus what you're getting out of it. Even so much as just like a fertile ground, just make the mana from the land, make a little bit more. And this becomes a ridiculous engine of sorts, let alone your lands that scale with your artifacts, which was insane. I mean, this is just one of those cards that is a nice example of like they didn't know what they didn't know. And my God, you should not be untapping, tapping or untapping for that matter, artifact, creatures, or lands just for discarding a card. That's crazy. That's bananas. Oh my goodness. All right. Aaron, what's number 2?
My number 2 is a card that is so powerful that it has managed to replace an iconic card in Vintage, which is not easy to do. Yawgmoth's Bargain was restricted in Vintage up until last year, I believe. And you could start running more than one again, which is saying something. Yawgmoth's Bargain. You just say the name and people know what you mean and they know how powerful that card is. And this has replaced Yawgmoth's Bargain in Storm. Paradoxical Outcome in Vintage is also running this because why the heck not? Sure. It is a stupid engine that you can use on its own. Oh, and it's also a win condition too. My number 2 is Bolas's Citadel. So Bolas's Citadel is 3 colorless and 3 black. It's a legendary artifact from War of the Spark. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play the top card of your library. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its converted mana cost rather than pay its mana cost. What could possibly go wrong? Right. You basically turn every spell into Phyrexian mana. If you're playing a format like Vintage where everything's free or relatively cheap, who cares? You're racking up storm count, you're racking up prowess if you play your 1 Monastery Mentor. And if that doesn't work, you can also just tap it, sacrifice 10 non-land permanents like a bunch of monk tokens or like a bunch of Moxen. Each opponent loses 10 life, and then you time walk, untap, and do it all over again. You can tinker for this. That's the big draw of this, where you can pay 2 and a blue for tinker, which is a restricted card, search for an artifact, and put that artifact into play. Think about that. I mean, this is a disgusting card in the older formats. I had the pleasure of playing with this in Standard with the Golgari. You were playing with all the Explorer creatures. Mm-hmm. That got really nutty really fast, but this card is just a ridiculous engine. A lot of people called this, when the card first came out, if this is going to do some broken things, and it is more than living up to that promise.
I mean, Alexander Hayne most recently brought this to the Mythic Championship in an Esper control deck because that's what you do with this card.
Which you can even just do fair things. Yeah, right. We've said that about several cards throughout the night is, you can do broken things, but I think that speaks to the power level of the card where when you could just play fair, it's still good.
Yeah. This just plays fair. This is just like gain 3 life off of an Oath of Kaya, draw a couple of cards, and then pass the turn, and then your opponent's just behind with your control deck. Yeah.
And then that little bit at the end to tap and sack 10 non-land permanents. Just that last little bit of like, is this card good enough? Is this card okay? Well, okay, it also domes them for 10 after you've played everything on top of your library. This is a card that has a special promo. It has a draft weekend promo that right now that looks super dope. It's like a low from somebody sort of a upshot at the actual Citadel. It looks totally different, and it's beautiful. And it's $1.50 right now. And I'm telling you, should you be listening to this in the future after the year 2019 and you're on into the 2020s, and this card is not $1.50 for this super sweet promo version, like if you like this card, I would pick it up. Because this is one of those, they're probably not going to reprint it again anytime soon. It has a super cool, powerful effect. It's being played in much older formats, and at worst, it's a great casual card. So, that's me. I love Bolas the Citadel as well. My number 2 is one of the most referenced cards we've talked about on top 10 lists ever. It is the card I've given Wizards infinite crap for forever. It's one of the first cards I asked them questions about because I was like, what were you doing? What were you thinking when you made Cryptic Command? Cryptic Command is the crypticest of the commandicest. 3 blue, 1 generic mana for a rare instant. You choose 2, counter target spell, return target permanent to its owner's hand, tap all creatures your opponents control, or draw a card. Not a lot else to say, I assure you. Go back to some other lists. We've talked about Cryptic Command a whole bunch, so I don't want to talk a whole lot about it. All I want to note is I couldn't feel right making a pip list of like what's the most important cards with a bunch of pips on them, and not have Cryptic Command basically right near the top, and in fact so close near the top. As we move here to our number 1, I'm just going to assume you guys will have a whole lot of extra thoughts on Cryptic Command.
No,
because we've spoken about it like 7 times or something.
No, it's very good at what it does, and what it does is everything.
I've never cast one, but I've certainly been on the receiving end of one, and it's freaking not fun.
Never cast one?
Never cast
Really?
one.
It is the card that is the most played card in Modern that is intended to be cast for 4 or more mana.
You know, you think that new bra is a hug from Jesus. This girl ain't ever cast a Cryptic Command.
You know what you can do with Cryptic Command? Is you can counter a spell and then dredge 6.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, you have my attention.
Have I sold you?
It's funny because I had no interest in Ancestral Recall until I could dredge for 16, and then that felt great.
See, there you go. Well, that just lets me pivot into the number one. Into the number one that I share with Reuben. Into the number one that was just the instant, let's just put it in the number one slot and build the rest of the 9.
Right.
You can't, I think, talk about pip spells, pip permanents in particular, and think of there's a whole bunch of mana symbols on a card. What is the card that would best define a whole bunch of mana symbols? And oh my God, it ran a whole format to the point where it has its own season. Necro Winter happened. Necropotence is a hell of a Magic card. Ruben, what does it do?
Well, I mean,
everything.
It does. It wins you the game, is what it does.
What it does.
What Necropotence is it's 3 black mana for an enchantment. So 3 total mana. The first line of text is skip your draw step. It's a drawback. Second line of text is whenever you discard a card, exile that card from your graveyard. That's a drawback. That's what Scry Magazine called the worst card in the Ice Age expansion.
They sure did.
Which is where this card first appeared. But, that magical last line of text, pay 1 life. Exile the top card of your library face down. Put that card into your hand at the beginning of your next end step. That means that you can just go Swamp, Dark Ritual, Necropotence, pay 3 life. You're back up to 7 cards.
That's it. Now,
next turn, play a Swamp, play a Dark Ritual, play 5 things, pay 7 life. You're back up to 7 cards.
This was a level up card for me. I remember when I first started playing the game, and I've talked about this before, I didn't get it. You know, like I came back to the game around Innistrad. You know, I'd been playing since Ice Age, but I wasn't really playing. I came back around Innistrad, and I just didn't get it. I was like, ew. I was like, no, why would I not want to draw step? This card is terrible. And then I was like, ew, a life per card. That's a lot, you guys. Like, why am I doing this? Like, I didn't get it. And then the more I started playing older formats, like I started getting into Modern, and then it kind of dawned on me. I was like, oh. And then once I discovered things like Storm, like it's a key part of Vintage Storm. Your life is a resource, and if you can just get the game over with, if your deck is packed with the right cards, you can just string a win together. Even now, I'm learning that when I cast a Necro, I can Necro for 7. And I know I already have maybe 4 in my hand, but you get rid of the ones you don't need, and you sculpt that busted hand that'll help you untap and win the game.
Now, for what it's worth, the entire Magic community didn't get it when they first saw that card.
Right.
Particularly the authors of Scry Magazine or Inquest or whatever it was.
It was Inquest.
It was Inquest, yeah. But look. Don't look at the iconic Masters version with the really nice, sweet, elegant words on it. Oh no. Go back to Ice Age. Look at that word soup, that freaking word salad that tells you 2 very negative things at the very beginning of the card. It establishes up front, these are negative things to you. You don't get a draw phase. If you discard a card from your hand, you exile it. Well, you remove it from the game. So you're like, wow, well, I'm already 2 steps down. This better be decent. And then we got this weird 0 colon. We got a bunch of extra rules about discarding it or whatever, effects that prevent damage and whatnot. There's a bunch of words on this card. So it's a lot harder to see that this is one of the best draw engines ever made back in the day. Nowadays, you got these nice, sweet, breaks, and there's just nice, sweet lines just to make it really simple and easy for you. Oh no, back then you kind of had to figure this out, and no one did except the top pros of the time. And this card was absolutely fantastic. Aaron, what's your number 1?
I've had the pleasure of doing some broken things in my day. I've played Dredge, I've played Storm, I've played Living End, I've played Bolas' Citadel, but there is one deck that is so broken and powerful that I alone cannot figure it out. I don't have the time to figure out this deck. It is known to only a select few. There have been many articles written about exactly how to play this card, but it's so forbidden. It's so dark. It's so scandalous. I still don't think I'm ready. People have told me I'm ready. I don't believe them. I'm not ready for Doomsday.
You're not.
Doomsday. Oh my God. Doomsday is 3 black. It is a sorcery. It is originally from Weatherlight. Pay half your life rounded up. That's the first line. Put your graveyard on top of your library. It's so powerful. I feel inadequate just talking about it. Then remove all but 5 cards of your library from the game. Put the rest on top of your library in any order. There have been so many think pieces written about what exactly your doomsday pile should look like. And you could do any combination of like a lab maniac, a pact of negation to like protect the combo. But this is art right here. Like I wouldn't even know where to begin. I've played in 3 seasons of the VSL and I've wanted to learn. I think it could take me an entire season just to learn how to play this effectively. Like it is one of the most difficult decks ever out there. I feel like anytime I'm watching somebody play it, it is always a treat because I'm just in awe of their ability to do this. I actually beat somebody the other day on Magic Online who killed himself. He was at 1. And he did the Doomsday, and I didn't know how that was going to go down. Where I was like, "Am I dead? Like, I'm fine with it, but what's going to happen?" Like, just the awe of this card, the power of this card. I mean, just look, I can't.
It's absurd. It's an absurd Magic card. This is if the classic like stump a judge card is humility. Every question starts with humility. Every stump a spike card starts with Doomsday.
Yeah.
It is, okay, you're in this situation, you cast Doomsday, how do you get out of it?
And you also just feel unworthy. Like, you look at this card and you're like, am I ready for this?
It's freaky. It is a freaky, weird, hard card.
I want to learn.
From Weatherlight. From freaking Weather from the 90s, y'all. Just showed up to be weird and odd and half your life rounded up because that's a thing. And you got 5 cards. Good luck. I hope they can win you the game. And the piles you can make, the articles that have been written about it are absolutely terrific. It's a hell of it's a thinker's card, right?
It's gotta be. You know, I've compared playing broken decks to a high, and I can only imagine, I can only imagine what that high feels like when you succeed. I'm not ready. I'm not ready.
Some Magic that you play is just about solving the puzzle. And my God, I can't imagine any better feeling of solving the puzzle than Doomsday.
Feel amazing to just cheat. There's just nothing more black than like this, and just
finding the 5 cards, the exact 5 that you want, and figuring out what's the right order to put them in, which is amazing. Yep. Well, those were our top 10 pip cards. You will see them on screen right now for your review. Take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Reuben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
My pips don't lie.
Hey, yo. Thank you, Reuben.
Thank you.
Didn't have a sweet pun waiting on us.
I didn't have a great pun at the end. No, I was thinking too much about how I want to cast Doomsday and Commander.
Watch the pips, not the lips.
Heyo. Move here to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, my co-host, Aaron Campbell and Reuben Bressler, you guys for watching and listening, and hope you support us at patreon.com/magicmics. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at twitch.tv at Magic Mics, on Twitter at Magic Mics Cast, our Magic Mics subreddit, and like the Magic Mics page on Facebook. Talk to us privately at magicmicspodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at magicmicspodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes and Spotify, or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mics. Good night, everybody.